Hello, and welcome to Meeting in the Sacred, a podcast where each week we invite you into diverse conversations about physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being in the pursuit of wholeness. My name is Danielle Chandler. I'm a Christ Path mystic and wholeness coach.
And my name is Theresa and I'm an interspiritual enthusiast and published author with an eclectic Christian background. And no matter where you are in life, if you're curiously seeking, deconstructing, reconstructing, struggling in your faith, or just feeling lost, you are welcome here. You are listening to episode 7 titled The Human Spirit. The human spirit is often associated with qualities such as courage, determination, hope, and resilience in the face of adversity. Jose Salvador Alvarenga is a Salvadoran fisherman who spent 13 months adrift at sea. He is the person in the recorded history to have survived. He is the first person in recorded history to have survived in a small boat at sea for more than a year. On November 17, 2012, Alvarenga set off on a professional fishing trip with a young fisherman named Ezequiel Coroba, with whom he had never worked. Having embarked from a fishing village on the Pacific coast of Mexico's southern Chiapas state, they planned to be out for about 30 hours hunting shark, tuna, and mahi-mahi. A few hours into their voyage, a storm struck that lasted 5 days and blew them off course. Alvarenga called his boss on the ship's radio for help, but it and much of the rest of the boat's electronics had been disabled by the storm. The boat's motor was damaged. A search party was sent, but after 2 days with no success, their boss gave up and assumed they had drowned. Alone and without food or supplies, the two fishermen survived by eating raw fish, turtles, and jellyfish. They drank rainwater and turtle blood. And as weeks turned into months, Coroba became severely unwell from eating months of raw food and died. Alvarenga then endured another 9 months alone at sea until he eventually spotted a small island. Abandoning his boat and swimming to the shore, he almost immediately met a local couple who alerted authorities. He had reached the Marshall Islands. His journey lasted 438 days, and his voyage estimated to have covered between 5,500 and 6,700 miles. And I got this article from history.com. I mean, can you even imagine? I can't wrap my head around that. 438 days lost at sea.
What? I think at 3 days I would have been done.
Done.
Yeah.
Tapping out. Beam me up, Scotty. Like, what in the actual? No, I'm out. And I pulled this story because when I was thinking about, the human spirit and all the different directions that we could go with that, what I was really drawn to was the human spirit's drive to survive these extreme situations. And, if you just go and do Google search, you can find some extremely mind-blowing cases and stories. I'm sure we've all heard some of them where it's just absolutely hard to fathom how a person would endure. And, 2 men set out on this trip, and one of them became sick from eating raw food. He didn't die from eating raw food. He died because he decided he didn't want to eat after suffering from being sick. And of course, not just being sick at that point, there's a whole lot more going on in the psyche of the individual as well. But this person was like, I'm not, if I starve to death, I would rather take that fate as of right now than eat and have to feel this way, prolong the way I'm feeling right now. So he actually stopped eating, was incapable of eating. Whereas the other guy, Alvarenga, continued exactly the way he had been going. The human spirit is believed to be the driving force behind personal growth, self-discovery, and the pursuit of meaning and purpose in this life. Interestingly enough, some have described meaning as being connected to our essence. Being connected to your essence is like the meaning of life, as some have said. So in this regard, the spirit is the force behind the search to connect to itself, right? So if based on the connectedness to our essence is the meaning of life, then that would also mean that our essence is driving us to this discovery. That our essence or our spirit is driving us to discover itself. And we'll get back to the story about the guys in the boat because it kind of all comes back around after we have this discussion. But I think today, many people use spirit and consciousness interchangeably. It's like our spirit, i.e. consciousness, is a perfected version of ourselves existing in a higher dimension, encouraging ourselves, the part of us experiencing this natural realm, to reach upward and to integrate spirit into matter. So like think thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. So many people today see themselves as existing in the whole, in the completion, in the full union of self and source, where self dissolves. And simultaneously living in the perception of individuality and separation. Can you be an individual and still be aware of yourself as the one, as part of the one? That's what I think the interesting journey is that I had mentioned a minute ago. The human spirit calling us into the awareness of that completion with all that is, or God, right? I've even heard people say that we have a God-shaped hole in our hearts. So this I see also as fitting for that, because the God-shaped hole seems to be the vacuum that pulls us closer to that finding the fill, finding the perfect fit, or becoming, as you and I like to say, aware of God that is. I don't believe we have a God-shaped hole. I think that is a great metaphor for the experience of the search. And even though what we are searching for already is, there is something about the human spirit, while still in the state of searching, will cause us to endure. It will cause us to go beyond the limits of nature. It will cause us to break out of limitations that seem supernatural, and that's what I see happening. That's why I use this particular story, because the question is, what is it that would drive us? What is it that drives a human being to be able to move a vehicle, to turn over a vehicle to save someone they love? That I see as the human spirit. That is the force that can push us into the supernatural reality of who we really are, but we're not living in that state because we haven't been inspired to operate in that state And as we were saying in the episode that is actually after this one, our next episode that we've already recorded, but we were talking about how being inspired, being inspired also can come from suffering, and a lot of times does. That inspiration sounds like a pretty word, but inspiration is often the product of something extremely painful. And this man, we could say, was inspired to stay alive. And I think that's what the human spirit does. Inspires us to stay alive and to go beyond staying alive.
Yeah, it's interesting to sit with these tension points, because it seems as though oftentimes in life we enter these spaces of uncertainty or unknown that fear can show up, but somewhere people will see it as opportunity. And just like the example of the person lifting the car, it's like something is switching on inside of this person that's like, I have to go save this person from being squished by this vehicle, or and there's no rational thinking through of like, is this possible? It's just this instinctual, like, I have to go do this thing. And just like your story with the two sailors, you have two people that are in a boat coming from two different life experiences, but one of them's resilience showed up different than the others. And the other, like, he was still exercising his resilience to a point until he said enough is enough for him. Recently I came across this phrase, fear, tension, pain cycle. And that was coming from a teaching that I was listening to about birthing. And so when a person is about to give birth and they start focusing on the fear becomes stuck in the body, and it actually creates more tension in the body. And so when a person can come into a place of detaching from the fear, that sensation in the body actually loosens. I haven't given birth yet, so I haven't actually experienced that. But something that I have done is gone skiing, and my husband was trying to teach me how to ski. And it was the same type of instruction that he gave me. He said, you need to loosen your body. You need to kind of just get into this space of being comfortable, because the more tension you have, your joints are going to lock. You're not going to be as flexible when you are moving down the hill, and you're going to cause yourself to actually fall. And when you're in that moment, you're thinking, I'm trying to save myself. I'm trying to protect my life. I don't want to fall. But there's something inside of that experience that tries to convince you, well, if you are afraid, you care. If you are afraid, you're taking responsibility of your life, which is not necessarily accurate.
Not necessarily accurate.
No. But those are, looking at myself, that's a narrative that I picked up growing up. I had to unpack this later in life, but something that I identified when I sat with this idea of worry was, where did this come from? Where did this narrative kind of play out in my life, and what does that narrative sound like? And I can remember coming home really late at night when I was in my early 20s, and my dad would be waiting up for me, and he's like, "Oh, where were you? I was worried sick," and that message, the message I got from that was, I am worried about you, so I care. And so I translated that into my own life. Well,
Wow.
I have to be worried about things in order to show I care. And it also is suggesting that I'm being responsible. So that attitude,
That's
that attitude,
huge.
yeah, that attitude from the narrative has sculpted for myself in the past, different behaviors. And I would say even habits, because how often do we, get into these mental ruts where we start to do the same type of thinking process over and over and over again, and it just becomes this natural habit of how we think. And thinking about the spirit and resilience, I know that we can do the same thing in a resilient type way, where we can take on different mindsets and perspectives and rewrite our narratives. And it's really a profound moment of transaction when we are able to identify, for instance, using the example that I just did with worry, and sitting with it and unpacking it and being like, okay, why have I chosen this way of thinking, and where did this come from? And then being able to say, well, what's another way I can do this? Like, what's another, I guess, form of living that's more freeing, that is more empowering, that can help elevate me into what I would perceive as a more life-giving way of life, and I feel like that does play a role in these moments where we do perceive fear is showing up, and we can rewrite the fear, because the fear isn't as scary, I guess, as it once was. The standard of our identifying what fear is lower. Our norm, the way that we work from that place has shifted. So I think this idea of spirit, the attitude of the heart, or perspective of life, this man in the boat that's able to be in it for 400 days. Bless his soul.
Right.
His tolerance, his pain tolerance, had to have shifted somewhere in his life, I feel like, for him to be able to perceive that there has to be hope out there. There has to be some kind of, something is coming my way, for him to be so resilient and optimistic. Because I mean, 400 days.
Well, you said some really good stuff. And, when you said that you had developed the belief that worrying equaled caring, that's big. It made me wonder, did you have a hard time perceiving, or did you have a hard time when somebody who was close to you didn't have the same amount of worry? Did it somehow equal that they didn't care? Like somebody that was more easygoing, laid back, not stressed out. And I guess I say this because in my own relationship, I have felt at times that, and I think Joe has said sometimes he's implied but not fully come right out and said it, maybe because he might not have had this revelation that you've had about worry, and about how, that worry is attached to your perception of being responsible and being caring. Those are two big words, responsible and caring. I mean, oh my
Right.
God, like those are two very important things for you, right? To be responsible and to be a caring person. Those are your values. Those are my husband's values. Those are my values too. But because of maybe growing up in a worrying environment where worry equaled responsibility and care, he's now married to somebody who tends to be, I carry myself in a much less worried mannerism. It doesn't mean I don't become anxious about things and catch myself worrying, but it's a different energy. I'm not a worrier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes when situations have come up where he is in that worriness, I make up words.
So do I, girl.
Where he's in that worriness, and I'm not, it comes off to him as if I don't care about
Mm,
that thing as much as him. Or I might even feel a little bit slighted because I'm perceiving that what he is sensing or suggesting or non-verbalizing is that I'm also not as responsible.
mm,
That if I am not worrying about it, I'm not as responsible. And he's not the only person in my life that I have kind of felt that from. And I've had to
mm-hmm.
actually sit in my own space and have a conversation with myself about it, because I'm not going to carry an offense for, which I have done. And this is where it became me realizing my thought patterns, my unhealthy thought patterns, and my unhealthy thought patterns were that I would get offended at that unspoken, and you could say it was an assumption I was making. But there have been times where, he has implied or said things along the lines of, well, it has to be, I have to worry about it. It's the responsible thing to do, right? So you're saying, but you're not saying that since I'm not worrying about it, that I am not doing the responsible thing, or that I'm not being responsible. So then I would then take it upon myself to now feel slighted and defensive, because now I'm insulted that you would say that you're indirectly accusing me of not being responsible. And then every single time he was worrying and I wasn't, I'm now feeling like I'm being judged for not being responsible. And so these layers are stacking against him because I'm
Mm-hmm.
offended. And I finally realized one day, oh my God, whether he's saying it or not saying it, I'm still experiencing it. And I'm the one getting offended. I'm the one
Mm-hmm.
carrying the offense. And now I'm the one sitting over here pissed off. And I don't need to be, because at the end of the day, if he's in a place where that's his default, and he's not being, at this time in his life, moved into a place of dealing with it as you have dealt with it because you were inspired to through a difficult situation. Let's even say it was the skiing, and it was a difficult thing for you to adjust to, and you realize, oh my God, why is this so difficult? Because I'm worrying about it. Why am I worrying about it, right? And so it led you to discover something about yourself. Well, my husband's journey may not be discovering something about that part of himself yet. He's discovering other
Mm-hmm.
things, right? So he's not there yet. No big freaking deal. But what is the big deal is that I'm sitting over here letting my peace get rocked.
Mm,
And so I finally had to realize, like, wait a minute. Regardless of whether or not the person who is with me needs to worry to feel responsible, it's my choice whether or not I want to allow that to offend me. Even if they are judging me and thinking I'm not responsible, who cares? Who cares?
mm-hmm.
Let me tell you, I was so set free. I just got to this place where when I really, really, really took the knowledge from my head ability about it being my responsibility um, to determine that narrative for myself. That his thoughts and feelings don't determine whether or not I'm caring or not caring, whether or not I'm responsible or irresponsible. It's not up to him. So I was able to finally, truly, like, release him from all that offense that I had been holding, and be okay with the fact that he still worries. I don't as much, and that's okay too. And even if he thinks it's irresponsible of me, that's fine too. Guess what?
Mhm.
I don't care. I just don't care. You know, and I think that I wanted to circle back to the talking about how the essence of the spirit is also the same part of us that draws us into the deep calling out to deep, right? That's what the Bible says.
Mhm.
It says that the deep calls out to deep. It's that. It's the human essence, the deep part of yourself that is calling out to the deep part
Mhm.
of yourself. Like, how crazy
Yeah.
is that, right? But it's like this part of you on the inside, and then there's the all of you that's connected to God everywhere all of the time. And then there's this identity in between that we live and move and experience the natural realm with. And so it's connecting the deep with the deep, and then being able to live in this natural realm from a place of that connectedness. And I
Mhm.
think that it's those fears that we develop in that shell of the natural identity or the ego or the place of identity, our the place of individuality, where we have developed who we are, who I am as Theresa, and then deep inside this individual that I call Theresa is the essence of who I am that is connected to the all that is, and that I could perceive or draw a picture that it's out here, and that this individuality of me is here, and that the deep is in here. And so when I begin to connect that deep with all that is, because it's the same stuff, it's all the same stuff, then the individual of who Theresa is, which also has all of Theresa's fears, all of Theresa's pride, the things that I think I'm good at, which hold us back too. So the things that I've created through my natural experience in this realm, subconsciously. I mean, we don't create them on purpose until we learn that we can create them on purpose. Up until we learn that we can create on purpose, we're just creating all the time, and we just then one day go, oh, wait, whoop, brakes. I can change the way we create stuff. How cool is that? Because my essence is created to the all that is. And I realize that the Theresa that I've been doesn't have to be the Theresa that will continue, because the essence of who I am, the essence of God within me, now connecting to God all around me, has made this connection that I've become a conduit of this supernatural power flowing in and through my life. And now my thoughts are no longer creating these superficial experiences, but my thoughts can move into the power of creating on purpose.
Mhm.
And you know, and that's what you were kind of talking about when you had this moment of realizing that, wait, I can stop this train of thoughts that
Mhm.
are cycling out of control, creating more discomfort for myself, because I've subconsciously chosen to be in fear. But now I can just say, thank you for this gift, this intersection that has disrupted my pattern, which is why, by the way, I like to say things that might make people go, sometimes it's an F bomb. Sometimes I'll say spell instead of prayer. Sometimes I'll, you know, whatever. Like, I know exactly what the heck I'm doing. I know exactly what the heck I'm doing. I'll do it even with my kids, because I really don't curse that often. I've gotten more comfortable with it because I just love the fact that I'm not very much of a cursor, that when I do, it jacks people up. And I like that. So I'm like, oh, cool. This is fun. Um, because jacking ourselves up, getting jacked up, is a real it's an opportunity for us to disrupt those patterns. And you said that there's this place of going, is this possible, is this possible? And that logical thinking of like, that stops us from doing the impossible or the seemingly impossible, is because that logic gets in there and goes, and it starts trying to calculate everything based on all of the information that it already has. And in a lot of cases, that information is extremely limited. And so we're calculating the percentage of our ability to do the supernatural based on all that we've ever seen and learned. And for most of us, we have a really little tiny, possibly maybe not even existent point of reference for supernatural. And so calculating whether or not it's possible isn't even in our frame of reference. And so how do we get besides somebody else or something else throwing curveballs, disrupting our patterns, and doing one of two things, either making us super uncomfortable, pissed off, and offended, which eventually makes us just sick and miserable and we don't grow, or these curveballs and these disruptive things happen in our lives which make us super uncomfortable, upset, and offended, and then we realize, I don't have to stay this way. But there's a switch that happens. And I do think that, like you said about the guy in the boat, he must have experienced, we assume, he must have experienced some things that gave him a point of reference for his ability to endure that maybe, maybe the other gentleman didn't have. And so that would bring us to something else we've talked about in another episode, which was maybe everybody doesn't have the capacity to turn that switch on. Or maybe they haven't lived and experienced enough yet to have developed the ability to have that point of reference for turning that switch on. I don't know. That to me is a mystery. That to me is part of the mystery of and it should give us compassion for people, because it's not up to me to know. And I don't know, no matter how well I know you. You could be my relative, my husband. I haven't lived in your shoes. So I don't know what exactly you have in your toolbox at this moment or any given moment to be able to make that connection with your essence and the essence of the creator or the divine, the supernatural, the infinite, to be able to make that connection so that you can step out of that fear-based, logic-based, limited, I don't know if I can mindset and into anything's possible mindset. We don't know where everybody's switch is. But I have a question that maybe you can help answer. And that would be to our listeners today, if they're saying, well, yeah, I've had a lot of experiences in my life that, assimilated a crossroads experience where I was able to realize I was operating in a mindset or pattern that was holding me back from fulfilling more in my life or living a more meaningful life. I was able to realize that. Somebody said something to me one day and it, boom, the lights went off, and I was able to look at, evaluate why I had been thinking and doing. So some of our listeners might be really resonating with those experiences. They're here. They've probably had some experiences in their lives that have inspired them one way, shape, or form to start questioning and challenging certain things that were on autopilot before. And then you may get to a point where, okay, those have happened, but now you realize that you don't have to wait for existential crisis. You don't have to wait for something crazy to happen in your life to go to the next level of experiencing your potential that you had experienced through that crisis. I don't have to be shipwrecked to experience my power anymore. That experience came and taught me a lot of stuff. I mean, thank God I wasn't the shipwrecked one, but those other metaphoric shipwrecks in my life came, they taught me stuff. But I don't want to wait for those opportunities to continue growing. So how can we suggest or inspire or encourage our listeners to make that connection with the divine, with their spirit, their divine spirit, the essence, the deep within them? How do they go about connecting with the divine, which is everywhere? How do you connect the inside with the outside? How do you bring those together so that you're living as a conduit for that power, for that spirit, for that revelation in your life, and you're not living out of the place of egotistic reactions?
Yeah. So I can remember when I was in school hearing some of my teachers talking about a similar question or idea. And they said so often people wait until there's crisis to go get help. So often they wait until their marriage is falling apart, or, any type of relationships falling apart. Maybe they're losing their job, and they go right then when things are blowing up to get help, and it's often kind of too late. And they suggested, like, what is it that we can do every day to take personal ownership and responsibility of our lives, knowing that just because you're not in a state of crisis right now doesn't mean you won't potentially get to a point where I took that upon myself, or I took that information upon myself, and like really, really felt that there was something on that. And so I decided to apply it to my own life to see how well that worked. And honestly, I'm really glad that I did do that. I started to sit with, like, what is my identity, and where does that come from, and what is my value, and what are my core values, what are the boundaries that I can put around those core values to help myself understand who I am and put my words to that I get to take ownership of that exercise, that I get to sit with myself and really get to know who I am. And I think through even an exercise like that, laying the foundation moving forward for myself, that it helped to establish a series of questions that created curiosity within me so that I could, in those moments of crisis, return to, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? When did this feeling start? And like being taken back to memories of my childhood. And for myself, inviting spirit, Holy Spirit, the divine, into those moments and asking, well, what is it that I might have been believing that wasn't necessarily in alignment to my true identity? How do you see me? How did you see me? And inviting the answer or whatever response I would receive to rewrite the narrative, because just like the illustration I gave of worry, my parents having a behavior that communicated to me this idea that worry was false responsibility, or that I cared, or sorry, that they cared. I had to rewire or rewrite those narratives so that in those tension points of life where maybe somebody might have said something or done something, maybe I felt triggered or internally agitated, asking myself, why am I feeling this way? Like, what is it that is causing me to actually be having this internal stress response that is either causing me to want to fight this person, run away from them, or completely shut down? And you said so many great things. I wanted to like chime in so many times when you were talking, but something when you were sharing about your personal experience, and with relationships, when anybody says to me, like, oh, I'm having this challenge in my life, or, my relationship feels like it's on the rocks, or I just can't get over this thing, or I just don't know how to move past whatever, I say, what have you been praying? Because so often people are not necessarily perceiving the answer to their prayer to look different than what they expected to. And so all of these like tension points that we've been highlighting in our podcast today, I see that when people are having these challenges, it's actually an answer to their prayer. It's an invitation for them to step in to choose transformation and to choose how to rewrite these narratives. But until we are aware that they are invitations, if we move into a stress response, we will feel triggered, and it's going back to the things that we once thought were helpful, especially as children, because they were really trying to protect us or help us to feel safe, So I think having, for myself, an awareness of, for instance, like what does it look like, or who do I want to follow my life after? What do I want my life to reflect? For me, I have chosen to want to follow the Christ path, and that looks like something very specific. And so if I want to have a life that's saturated in love, that's going to look like something. If I want to have self-control in my life, that's going to have to show up in a certain way. If I want to be a kind person, if I want to be gentle. So when I'm going through life not experiencing those things, and I identify it because I have that set of core values that I'm constantly going back to as kind of my reminder, it helps me to go into that place to take personal responsibility, because I want my inner world to reflect these things that I am passionate about. And I want to show up in the world around me in that way. So I think that's why I say we are our greatest gifts. We are our spirits. I see as the seat of our being where we commune with the Creator. And that space is our greatest gift. We are our greatest gift, that we get to understand and unpack our capacity, that we have this opportunity to actually transform our minds. We have the ability to take these experiences of our past that may have shaped us, and we may have thought like, oh, this is just how the world is. That doesn't have to be the end of our story. Those experiences of our past do not have to define us. They are not the end. There's scientific evidence that our brains are elastic. They can change. Some people, they may not know that, and so they think, oh, this is just how I am. Like, I have a negative lean, but that's not necessarily scientifically true. And there's hope
I
there.
love it.
That's a physical thing. If people are more into looking at the body and the physical nature of the human, but going back to spirit and soul, it's like we have that mysterious element within ourselves that really does have a force, a power, an otherworldliness. There's like a bank of resources available that we get to choose to tap into.
The part of us, I took some good notes when you were talking because I get it. Like once you start going, it's like, just go. and we'll circle back. There's a lot of good stuff to go off of there. The part of us that is seeking, something other than what we're experiencing now is our human spirit. That is our essence. And I say human spirit, I want to say synonymously with the Christ in us. Christ in us is the human spirit. And it can be described in so many other ways. I'm open to hearing how other people describe the life force that causes us to seek, to ascend, to rise above, to overcome, to change our experience. I know that we have listeners and will have listeners that will listen to something like this, which is evidence that they're seeking something. Because if you're not seeking something, you don't turn on a podcast. If you're not seeking something, you're not seeking something. Let me take that back, because even not seeking can be a form of seeking. You can be not seeking, you can be not seeking something that is going to move you in a healthy direction. You can be seeking something. You can be straight uncomfortable with how things are in your life, and you can be inspired to seek something that seems to represent the direction you want to go. Or you can seek something that is simply going to do what you think is going to make you feel more comfortable with your pain. And both are seeking, and both are coming from the human spirit. It's just that the human spirit, the essence within us of God, of source, is seeking always for our highest and best, but it's fed through the ego, which is the experiences of Theresa, of Danielle, of whoever you are at this moment. Your shell. The Bible calls it your flesh nature or the sinful nature. And quite honestly, I look for other words because of how the word sin has been used so horribly in Christian history to cause us to self-loathe, to cause us to reject our divine nature, to cause us to think there is nothing good in us, right? I don't like to use that word, but because I have found the ability to hear what Paul was saying beyond what the translations have brought us to here.
Mm-hmm.
So when Paul was saying in the book of Romans, there is nothing good in me, he actually goes on to say, because a lot of people in Christianity will say this is called total deprivation theology. And total deprivation theology is where there is no good in me apart from salvation in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Marred image theology within Christianity is the theology that our divine perfect image was marred, and that when we basically awaken to the message of Christ, we are able to have our identities restored. If I was to have to fall into one of those schools, I would fall much closer to marred image theology, although I don't like to box myself there either. So when Paul said, there is nothing good in me, he goes on then to say, and I'm paraphrasing, and it's in the book of Romans, you can look it up. He goes on to say, that is in my sinful nature. Okay. And so I want to just point out that sinful nature in that sense it doesn't have anything to do with the bad girl that I am. It has nothing, well, I don't want to say nothing to do with, but that's not the focus, right? It is simply the part of me that has not recognized who I am. Therefore, it is the part of me that still operates out of out of the mindset of separation from love or God, the mindset of lack. And when we say lack, I mean any person on any given day that doesn't feel loved. That's the sinful nature. That is the part of us that is perceiving we are separated from love. It's not that you're sitting there and you're committing these crimes and these sins. You're simply stuck in a place that is not good, meaning you certainly don't feel good there. You certainly aren't experiencing good health there. You're probably not experiencing meaningful relationships there. So if we want to just define good as in the quality of your life and relationships and finances and opportunities and all those things, then Paul was saying there is no good in me, my sinful nature, that is. What he is saying is there is no good in staying in the place of feeling separated from love, right? He wasn't saying there is no good in us. We are totally deprived of all good, because even in other parts of the Bible, it says that Christ is in all, before all, through all, that everything was made through Christ. Everything that is was made. That means that the essence of Christ is within every one of us. And God, I don't believe, has to look past me to see Jesus. Because if we go back to Genesis, we see that God was happy with everything that God made. And this, again, this is if you want to look at the Bible. And I love to look at other references. I just don't know them as well. And that's why I don't want to throw other people's, spiritual theologies out there sloppily when I've been studying scripture for so many years. I like to pull from that and show people how I'm able to see the things that Jesus and the apostles and the disciples were saying that has not been portrayed to us in such a way, right? And so the part of us that is doing the seeking is the part of us that is of the essence of Christ. It is the light in us. It is the purity in us. It is there. It is us. But you said, as an answer to the question that I had, how do you connect the deep within, the essence within, to the essence of God, of love? And you said that was starting to look into what is my identity, where does it come from, and learning what your true identity is. But then you went on to say, what do I want my life to reflect? And that you chose the Christ path. And it reminded me of something Jordan Peterson was saying, and I'm going to just paraphrase him as well. But he was bringing across his point that Jesus is the epitome of the best human being. And that Jesus is the archetypal perfect man or human. Okay? This is what Jordan Peterson was saying, is that even if you're not into Christianity, but you can look at Jesus as the archetype of the highest and best humanitarian. And you can choose to reflect your life. But finding that place, because when you were saying that, my heart was kind of going out a little bit to what I was hearing is people like just being stuck in that place of, but I don't have a reference point. You have Christ path. You have Christ. You can model and find your identity after this information. Well, what do I do? And that's not what I believe, nor is it what I want to believe right now. I'm not sitting in that place. So how do I find a reference point for my identity? But then you went on to say, what do I want my life to reflect? And I know that in a lot of recovery groups, they use the word higher power. And I'm not opposed to that either, because I've watched how people that have gone from believing that they are absolutely incapable of overcoming themselves, their sinful nature, or those patterns that are jacking up their life. They are absolutely incapable of overcoming them. They walk into a room, a AA room or an NA room, and they're like, don't try to get me to believe in no God. I'm not doing that either. And they go, well, then higher power. And I've even heard people say, what the hell is a higher power? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I connect with this higher power? And so I like that you said, what do I want my life to reflect? So in your pondering, that's a really good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Find someone, you don't have to make them God,
Yeah.
but find someone who has the qualities and the attributes of what you would like to see in your life, and then begin to see yourself as having those things. And if you could use your imagination, and I don't mean material things, but attributes, qualities, characteristics, traits, you could even imagine what your life would look like if you did have those characteristics and traits. So you can choose anyone or anything that
Mm-hmm.
displays the direction that you would like to see your life going. That will help you have a reference point for creating the image in your mind or the identity that is going to sit right with who you are. And again, back to something you said in the episode that we recorded, episode 8, is trusting that it's resonating with you.
Mm-hmm.
Trusting that it's resonating with you. And I personally do model my identity after Christ. That has been my experience in life that has worked the best for me. It has been, Christ has been the one that has led me through my healing. I have never heard of anyone saying that that they chose to genuinely get to know the person of Christ and they were disappointed. So I have no reason to change that because of how beautiful it's been for me. But like I've said before, my relationship with Christ has also led me to see the beauty in everyone else's path and their becomingness and how they end up becoming and identifying with who they were designed and created not to be, but who they are. Because we
Mm-hmm.
aren't becoming. We're not becoming. We perceive we're becoming, but it's what we already are. And as you and I have also said before, and it's what we're waking up to. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you find it hard to understand or perceive yourself waking up to a version of yourself that is different than the one you're experiencing right now because you have no point of reference for it and you're not in a place where you want to choose a God or guru or Christ, you're not in that place. You don't have to sit there and feel like you're hopeless and you're
Mm-hmm.
defeated. Begin to look for the attributes of peace. Begin to look for the attributes of hope. That find that reference point and that focal point, and then allow yourself in meditation, if you haven't developed the ability to sit and allow your imagination to take you into beautiful places, it's something that you may want to learn how to do. You may want to learn to exercise your imagination muscle, because by being able to imagine yourself as the person that you desire to be, and again, it's who you already are, but you're experiencing this part of this journey as something that you don't already have. And so in order for you to come into alignment with that which you already are, you've got to walk through this valley of feeling that you don't already have it. And so in the process of getting to that awakening or that realization of who you are, start here with, okay, well, I don't fully comprehend that I am that, and that's okay. I don't comprehend that I am that, but I can at least find someone. It might be a grandparent, it might be a teacher, it might be, a political figure, it might be a pastor, it might be Jesus, it might be Buddha, but find somebody that you appreciate the values and the characteristics, their values and who they are as a person, and then practice developing your imagination by starting to see what your life would look like if you embodied those traits. And that's just a good starting point for connecting with your higher self, I think. What do you think? I wanted to give people, I just felt really like, I really wanted to give people something they could do because
Yeah,
I
no,
just, you know, I
it's
just felt,
practical.
yeah,
I think that's really important
I
because
just felt like talking
go
about, sorry. I just felt like talking about, making the connection with our higher self,
for
making the
sure.
connection with God for a lot of people is just a complete foreign language right now. And they've got to be able to start somewhere because they're probably people that are listening that are just sitting in a place of desperation and like, well, that sounds great on you, but what
Yeah,
about me? And.
and that's why, I mean, you had reflected what I said, but that's why I said um I chose the Christ path, but there's other like attributes and people that we are drawn to, and there's a reason why. And I feel when I was in the beginning of really trying to change my life, in my early 20s, I sat with my mentor and she was teaching me all this stuff, but I'm like, but what does that mean? Like, I have no idea what that means. And like, how do I apply that practically?
Right.
And as I have worked with people and worked in addictions recovery, that's something that I have found that is extremely helpful for people to have kind of like, I guess, a plan of action or like a way to start because like there is no quote unquote right way, to move in this. I think that oftentimes people go to like self-help books or resources like that when they're trying to change something in their life because they do want some kind of an outline, and I don't think that there's necessarily a problem with that because I think the hope is that in an empowerment way, being able to understand how to think creates critical thinking skills inside of each person so that they can feel that they don't need to lean on somebody else to, have them tell them how to live or what to do. I don't think we were ever meant to depend on people in that way. I think we need people, but we are our greatest gift. There is this inner landscape in us. There is this, beautiful space that we get to explore and dive into within. And um I think that's what this whole episode is pretty much about. So
Absolutely. And it is like kind of, it's something that we could unpack in so many different directions, because I think the human spirit is just as infinite of a term as God.
mhm.
So it's something that we can unpack in so many different ways. But thank you so much for going here with me today, and we'll
Yeah.
start to wrap it up now. Um, another podcast idea I got from this one, because you had mentioned something about prayer, was like, what is prayer, how to pray, and
Mhm.
what if you're not a Christian, like, is prayer applicable? Like, that'd be some good stuff to get into one day. So thanks for all the ideas and the
Juicy nuggets.
inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah, juicy nuggets. Cool. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Everybody that's listening, um, I just want you to know that, and Danielle and I, we want you to know that our podcast is being cultivated as a place of community. So we would like for you to connect with us on our other platforms, on Instagram and Facebook. We'd like to dialogue with you. Since our podcast is being aired right now on YouTube, there's also a place there for you to communicate with us. And if you need somebody to bounce some of your ideas off of, we would love to see each of you engaging more with us and also with each other. So please leave comments and make sure you hit subscribe on our channel, YouTube, so that you can get notified of every episode that comes out every Tuesday morning, Standard Eastern Time, 10 a.m. If you want to get in touch with us personally, Danielle or I, you can reach us at meetinginthesacred.com. Each of us have individual pages, and we also have different services that we offer. And you can find me personally on unraveledtogether.com. And Danielle?
And you can find me on Instagram at You Are Fully Alive.
Awesome. So thank you so much for sitting with us today. We hope you were encouraged and inspired, and we look forward to getting to know you all as well as time goes on. Please let us know what your takeaway has been also from this episode down in the comments. And like I said, don't forget to subscribe. It helps us to get our message out there and to grow our community. So everybody be blessed, and namaste.